coma. That was the only word I heard while the doctors and nurses tried to stem the life bleeding from my wife. I couldn't stay there. Not then. Not while they attached the tubes and the machines. I left in search of a place where I could have a cigarette. An orderly pointed me along past the waiting areas. "Down there and through the fire escape." I went down the corridor, eventually coming to a set of fire doors. I pushed through into a small interior courtyard. At one time, someone had tried to make a garden area for patients, but now it looked to be turned over totally to the pursuit of the nicotine hit. 4 benches sat around a small pond. There might be fish in there, but if there were, they were living on the cigarette ends that were getting pushed around the surface by a sluggish fountain that burped and belched like an asthmatic cow. Butts, spent matches and empty cartons lay strewn in random patterns on the ground. On the far side of the pond sat just about the sickest man I've ever seen. He was in his pyjamas and dressing gown, his stick-thin body swamped by the clothing, his ribs standing proud from his chest in the 2 inches of flesh showing at his neck. His cheeks and eyes sunk far back into his skull, and his hair hung lankly over a liver-spotted scalp. In his right hand he held a lit cigarette, and in his left he clung tightly to a pole and the attached intravenous drip. He waved at me feebly, then went back to trying to work up enough energy to suck on the cigarette. I kept a close eye on him. He looked like he might keel over into the pond at any moment. I got my cigarettes out of my pocket, but my hand shook, so much so that when I took out my lighter, it jiggled free and fell with a plop into the pond. The old man waved me over. "I've got a light, if you need one." I went and sat beside him. Sick as he was, his hands were steadier than mine. He lit my cigarette for me and handed it over. "Let me guess," he said, wheezing. "Accident?" "How did you know?" "I've been in this place long enough," he said. He tried to laugh but got a coughing fit instead. "Besides, you've got a cut on your forehead. Your clothes are dishevelled and you walk like you've got minor whiplash injuries." I sucked at the cigarette, filling up, trying not to think about the crash of metal on metal, the sparkle of windshield glass in the headlights, or the blood on the road. "What are you, a doctor?" This time he did manage a laugh. "No, but I know hospitals. Have you got time for a story?" I nodded. I had more time than I knew how to deal with. We blew smoke at each other as the old man started to talk. "The night my life changed, the 30th of January all those years ago, started like many others. I left another dull chemistry lecture and had a few pints of beer. I was several sheets into the wind, and that was always a recipe for disaster, especially when I hadn't told my girlfriend Liz that I was going to be late. I got involved in a darts match, and I was having fun, even although I was so bad at the game that I was the one who ended up buying most of the drinks. At some point in the evening, the barman called me over and offered me the phone handset. "It's your girlfriend," he said. "She says she needs you right now." The drink spoke for me. "Tell her she needs her head examined. I'll be back when I'm good and ready." And so help me, I enjoyed myself. While she sat in an empty flat and decided on the future course of our lives, I enjoyed myself. I drank a lot of beer. I sang bawdy songs about the Mayor of Bayswater's daughter and the hairs on her dicky-dee-do, and only have a vague memory of getting back to the flat. I'll never forget the next hour, though. I wandered into the kitchen, bumping into tables and knocking over chairs. That took a minute. I put on the kettle and stood beside it while it boiled. That took 3 minutes. I took the coffee into the front room and watched the end of the late night news while smoking a cigarette. 10 minutes. The beer told my bladder it needed to get out. I put down my coffee and got out of the chair, slowly. I wasn't very steady. 1 minute. She lay in the bath, and she had used my razor on her wrists, her ankles, and her throat. She hadn't wanted to make any mistakes. This wasn't a cry for help. She'd tried that earlier, and I hadn't answered. For the past 15 minutes, she'd been dying. The old man started to wheeze, and when I looked over, I saw tears glisten in his eyes. He wiped them away and lit a new cigarette from the butt of the old. They took her to a hospital. Not this one, but not too far different. She was so close to death I could smell it on her, and I ran out of that antiseptic hell, and out into the night, where I too could seek some strength in a cigarette. He stopped again and looked at me. "Is it bad?" he asked. I knew immediately what he asked. I nodded. "Coma. She might never wake up." Once more there were tears in his eyes. I felt lost, alone. I lit up and stared at the stars, cursing a God who would let an innocent suffer while a worm like me could live. And that's when I saw him. An old man, so ill as to be nearly dead. He sat on a bench, wrapped in a robe, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Do you want her to live?" he said. "You can help?" He smiled. "Yes, but only if you promise never to stop smoking." "How will that help?" Again he smiled, thin wisps of smoke rising from his nostrils. "It might tip the balance of suffering in the long run. Besides, what have you got to lose?" I was desperate enough to do anything. "Shake on it," the old man said. I put out a hand, and he stubbed his cigarette out on it. He wheezed again, before putting out his hand, palm up. A small circular scar sat proud on the skin. "What kind of story is that?" I asked. "There's no point to it." "Oh, there is," he said, coughing. "Believe me, there is. My beautiful girl, she lived. Still does, in fact." "How was that possible?" He coughed up a lump of brown phlegm and hawked it into the pool where it sank. "The balance of suffering. 40 years of smoking." "That's all it took?" "All," he said and laughed bitterly. "Oh yes, that's all." "I'll take it," I said. "Take what?" "The deal. I'll take it." He showed me his thin, bony chest and coughed loudly for effect. "Sure." I nodded. "Shake on it," the old man said. I put out a hand, and he stubbed his cigarette out on it.